Kamla Chudal, nestled deep in the heart of India, was the village of Bhargavan, an old settlement that seemed untouched by time. Surrounded by dense forests and winding rivers, the village was picturesque during the day. But as night fell, a heavy shroud of fear covered the place, for the villagers knew they were not alone. They lived in the shadow of Kamla Chudal, a malevolent spirit who roamed the land after dark. Kamla was not always a Chudal. She was once a young woman, beautiful and kind-hearted, but her life had been tainted by tragedy. A century ago, Kamla had fallen in love with a man named Raghav. But fate had other plans. Kamla's family, obsessed with their caste and honor, forbade the union. In a cruel twist, they married her off to an abusive man from a neighboring village. Unable to bear the torment, Kamla took her own life, hanging herself from the grand peepal tree that stood at the village's edge. Her death was not the end but the beginning of a curse that plagued Bhargavan. Villagers spoke of her transformation into a Chudal, a vengeful spirit with feet twisted backward, a bloodthirsty gaze, and a hatred for anyone who reminded her of the life she was denied. Kamla's spirit haunted the peepal tree, drawing in lost souls and feeding on their fear. Those who wandered too close at night never returned, or if they did, they were shells of their former selves, eyes hollow and minds fractured. For years, the villagers tried to appease her spirit with offerings of sweets, flowers, and incense, but nothing seemed to quench her fury. The once vibrant peepal tree became a symbol of dread, its branches twisted like skeletal fingers reaching out to the heavens. No one dared to speak of Kamla openly, for even her name was said to draw her attention. Chapter 1: The arrival of Mohan. One summer, a young man named Mohan arrived in Bhargavan. He was a city dweller, come to stay with his uncle for a few months to escape the chaos of urban life. Mohan was a skeptic, someone who believed that the tales of spirits and curses were nothing but the imaginations of a superstitious community. He found the village quaint and charming, though he was intrigued by the odd behavior of its people. On his first night, Mohan noticed that as dusk approached, the villagers hurried indoors, locking their doors and windows tightly. Curious, he asked his uncle about it, but his uncle brushed him off, saying it was just an old tradition. Stay indoors after dark, Mohan. It's just safer that way, his uncle warned with a stern look, but Mohan was not convinced. On the second day, he ventured into the village square and struck up conversations with some of the locals. As he inquired about the strange customs, he sensed an underlying fear in their eyes. It wasn't long before the whispers reached him, Kamla Chudal. Mohan scoffed at the idea of a ghost haunting the village. This is just a story to keep children in line, he thought to himself. Yet, his curiosity got the better of him. That night, he stayed up, peering out of his window into the darkness. The village was deathly silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Around midnight, Mohan heard a faint sound, a soft, melancholic humming. He strained his ears, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. The sound was coming from the direction of the peepal tree. He wanted to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, but something compelled him to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, Mohan stepped out into the cool night air. The path to the tree was eerily quiet. As he walked closer, the humming grew louder, and he could swear it was a woman's voice, filled with sorrow and rage. Mohan reached the clearing, and there, under the twisted branches of the peepal, he saw her, Kamla. She was dressed in a tattered red sari, her hair a wild mess that flowed like a dark waterfall down her back. She was facing away from him, singing softly to herself. Mohan's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to take a step closer. He wanted to see her face, to prove to himself that this was all some elaborate prank, but when Kamla turned, Mohan's blood ran cold. Her face was pale, almost lifeless, with eyes that burned like embers in the night. Her feet were twisted backward, and her smile was a grotesque mockery of joy. Before Mohan could react, Kamla lunged at him with inhuman speed. Mohan stumbled backward, falling to the ground. Kamla's long, claw-like fingers reached for his throat, but just as she was about to grasp him, the sound of a distant temple bell echoed through the night. Kamla screeched, a horrible, ear-piercing sound that sent chills down Mohan's spine. She vanished into thin air, leaving only the lingering stench of decay. Mohan scrambled to his feet and ran back to his uncle's house, slamming the door behind him. He spent the rest of the night trembling in fear, unable to sleep. He had seen Kamla Chudal, and now he knew the horror that the villagers lived with every day. Chapter 2: The Curse Unveiled. The next morning, Mohan was pale and restless. He tried to talk to his uncle about what he had seen, but his uncle simply shook his head. You should never have gone to the peepal tree, his uncle said gravely. Kamla's spirit is restless, and now she knows you've seen her. You must leave the village, Mohan, before it's too late. Mohan, still shaken, refused to leave without understanding Kamla's story. He visited the village elder, an old woman named Maji, who was known for her knowledge of local history and lore. Maji was reluctant to speak of Kamla, but seeing the fear in Mohan's eyes, she relented. Kamla was wronged in life, and now she takes her revenge in death, Maji began, her voice heavy with sadness. She preys on those who are curious or foolish enough to seek her out. But there's more to her curse than just her presence. Kamla's anger is fueled by betrayal, and she will not rest until she has exacted her vengeance. Maji went on to explain that Kamla's spirit had been bound to the village by dark rituals performed by the villagers' ancestors. They had feared her wrath and tried to contain her by trapping her soul near the peepal tree. But this had only intensified her anger. Over the years, many villagers had tried to lift the curse, but all had failed. Mohan listened intently, feeling a mix of pity and dread. He realized that Kamla's story was not just a ghost tale but a tragic history of love, betrayal, and vengeance. Mohan decided then and there that he would try to help Kamla find peace, even if it meant risking his own life. Chapter 3, The Ritual. Mohan sought Maji's help to understand how Kamla's spirit could be freed. The old woman was hesitant but finally agreed. She told him of an ancient ritual that could potentially break the curse. It required facing Kamla under the full moon and offering her the items that connected her to her past life, a photograph of Raghav, a strand of her bridal jewelry, and a vial of holy water from the Ganges. But remember, Maji warned, Kamla's spirit is cunning. She will try to deceive you. You must keep your resolve strong, for if you falter, she will claim your soul. The night of the full moon arrived, and Mohan gathered the items as instructed. He made his way to the peepal tree, his heart heavy with fear and determination. The moonlight bathed the tree in an eerie glow, casting long shadows that danced in the night. As he approached, the air grew colder, and the humming began once more. Kamla appeared before him, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. She seemed more sorrowful than menacing, her eyes fixed on the photograph of Raghav that Mohan held in his trembling hand. Mohan took a deep breath and began the ritual, reciting the mantras Maji had taught him. Kamla's expression shifted from sorrow to rage. She screamed, a sound that pierced the night like a knife. The ground beneath Mohan shook, and the wind whipped around him violently. He held his ground, offering her the photograph and the jewelry. For a moment, Kamla's eyes softened, and she reached out, almost touching the items that connected her to her lost love. But then, the wind intensified, and Kamla's form began to twist and contort, her face morphing into a grotesque mask of anger. She lunged at Mohan, her claws outstretched. Mohan threw the vial of holy water at her, and Kamla shrieked in agony, her body dissolving into a cloud of smoke. The peepal tree's branches shook violently, and for a moment, Mohan thought he had failed. But as the smoke cleared, Kamla's form reappeared, more translucent and less monstrous. She looked at Mohan with a mixture of grief and gratitude, as if she were caught between her desire for revenge and the release of her tortured soul. Mohan held his breath, watching her closely. Kamla's twisted feet slowly turned forward, and the malice in her eyes faded, replaced by a deep, profound sadness. She looked at the photograph one last time, her spectral fingers brushing against the image of Raghav. A single tear fell from her eye, evaporating before it hit the ground. Mohan whispered softly, "You deserve peace, Kamla. Let go." Kamla's form began to dissipate, her outline blurring as she slowly faded into the moonlight. The air around the peepal tree grew warmer, the oppressive heaviness lifting as Kamla's spirit finally broke free of her earthly bonds. With a final, mournful gaze at Mohan, Kamla vanished, leaving behind only the faintest scent of jasmine in the air. Chapter 4, The Aftermath. Mohan collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by what he had just witnessed. The village, too, seemed to feel the change. For the first time in decades, the peepal tree stood quietly under the moonlight, no longer twisted with the dark energy of Kamla's rage. Mohan knew in his heart that Kamla's spirit had finally moved on, freed from the torment that had bound her to the village for so long. The next morning, the villagers gathered near the tree, hesitant but hopeful. They sensed that something was different, the air felt lighter, and the ever-present chill was gone. Mohan, still shaken, explained what had happened the previous night. The villagers listened in stunned silence, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Maji, the village elder, approached Mohan and placed a wrinkled hand on his shoulder. "You have done what none of us could. Kamla's soul is at peace now, thanks to you." The villagers, once fearful and bound by the curse of Kamla, began to heal. The peepal tree, which had once been a symbol of fear and death, became a place of remembrance. They hung flowers on its branches and lit small oil lamps to honor Kamla's memory, not as a vengeful spirit, but as a woman who had suffered unjustly. Mohan stayed in Bhargavan for a few more weeks, helping the villagers adjust to life without the fear of Kamla Chudal. He often visited the peepal tree, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The village felt different now, alive with a new sense of freedom and hope. On the day of his departure, the villagers gathered to bid Mohan farewell. They showered him with blessings and gratitude, grateful for his courage and kindness. As he left the village, Mohan glanced back at the peepal tree one last time. It stood tall and serene, bathed in the golden light of the morning sun. Mohan smiled, knowing that Kamla's tragic story had finally found its resolution. Epilogue: a new beginning. Years passed, and Bhargavan transformed into a vibrant community no longer shrouded in fear. The story of Kamla Chudal became a cautionary tale, told to remind future generations of the dangers of injustice and the power of forgiveness. The villagers continued to honor Kamla every year, lighting lamps and offering prayers for her peace. Mohan, now back in the city, often thought of the village and the brave spirit that had finally found rest. He kept Kamla's story close to his heart, a reminder that even the darkest souls could find light if given the chance. The peepal tree, once a symbol of despair, now stood as a testament to the power of redemption. Kamla was no longer just a ghost, she had become a part of the village's history, a spirit transformed by the courage of a young man who dared to confront her sorrow. And though she was gone, her story lived on, whispered among the leaves of the peepal tree and carried on the winds of Bhargavan, a place where the past was finally at peace. The end.